Tonight it's a Super Bowl 58 edition of This Week in Pro Football and our last show for the year. Sal Powell's on assignment in Vegas covering the big game and betted with the San Francisco 49ers, but we've got an all-star lineup right here for you. Ed Werder, Sean Green, Gary Myers, and the great Ray Didinger will all be here to talk all things Super Bowl 58 and some NFC East. We'll also explore with Ray Didinger whether Patty Mahomes could have excelled in any era of the NFL and what throwback quarterbacks would have been great today. It's all coming up right now on a Super Bowl edition of This Week in Pro Football.
It's time for This Week in Pro Football, a deep dive into the key issues and marquee matchups in the National Football League. For the next 60 minutes, we invite you to sit back or lean in with host Pat Callahan as we preview the week's Eagles matchup, big games, breaking stories, and all news NFL. It's This Week in Pro Football, right now on JAKIB Media Sports.
Hello, everyone. Pat Callahan joining you for our final edition of This Week in Pro Football for the 2023 season. Thanks to everybody for tuning in all season long. And of course, we'll use the usual bromides about how fast everything went, but actually it's kind of a long slog, September to February. One of the things actually I always liked about the NFL was it had a pretty long off season because I think it's good. Unlike baseball, which goes on for seemingly years at a time, hockey, basketball, football's got a shelf life and that's it. And then it's back and you get yourself all recharged over the spring and summer months for the NFL season. I don't want to hear any talk about this XFL, USFL, YFL, whatever. It's just never going to catch on. Spring football will never catch on in this country. But it's the end of the NFL season coming up in just a couple of days. And it's an odd Super Bowl in that I don't think there's a terrific rooting interest on either side. Be interesting to explore whether there is any Chiefs fatigue, just from the fact that this is their fourth Super Bowl in 5 years. And of course, the whole Taylor Swift factor too. And I myself don't think the 49ers are a likable team. I've copped to that a couple times on this show already. I don't like the 49ers at all. I do think they're a loud team. I think that they're a couple of guys on defense are borderline dirty. And I just don't like them. But so I don't see a nationwide rooting interest for San Francisco, and I wonder if some people are just tired of the Chiefs. But you got to admire them. You've got to admire the Chiefs for the fact they never go away. But it's a big show tonight. I want you to stay with me, please, for the whole 90 minutes or so. Ed Werder from ESPN will be joining me. I'll be talking to Ed about the Super Bowl, about the NFC East. Sean Green, let's get right down to it. Super Bowl, all kinds of props to talk about, plus the game itself. Gary Myers will check in. We'll talk some Hall of Fame with Gary. The announcement coming out very shortly. I'll try and get in to disclose it, but he's company man. I doubt he will. And then Ray Didinger to end the season. We'll be talking some Philadelphia Eagles with Ray and the Super Bowl and about the force of nature that is Patrick Mahomes. All right, how about a little tail of the tape here, ladies and gentlemen, coming into this game. How each team got here, right? San Francisco, to me, they squeaked in. And we're going to ask Ed Werder about that, too. San Francisco, 2 home games. They had the number 1 seed. They had a bye. But they beat Green Bay 24-21. They beat Detroit 34-31. I know Detroit got the late touchdown. But still, the 49ers trailed at halftime in both games. But still, give them credit. They managed to win the game. Kansas City, meanwhile, wins at home against Miami in the Big Chill, but then goes on the road at Buffalo and at Baltimore and comes away with 2 wins in those games, including obviously the AFC Championship game. And Kansas City can win them either way. That was 17-10. They beat the Ravens in the AFC title game. So the Chiefs have shown that they can win low-scoring games too. So it's a marked improvement defensively for Kansas City, but you got to give the Chiefs the edge there as far as how each team got here. All times, San Francisco 5-2 in Super Bowls. The Chiefs are 3-2. Kansas City was in 2 of the first 4 Super Bowls, then went a tidy 50 years. There you go, Flyers fans. It's not just them. 50 years between Super Bowls before they went back. But since then, this is going to be this is for the Chiefs anyway. Like I said, this is their 6th Super Bowl. So this is their 4th in the last 5 years. Kansas City has become a staple in the AFC Championship game. And you have to wonder, I'm going to ask Ray this, are they going to be there for years to come, assuming both Reed and Mahomes do not retire? A formidable duo. Since Mahomes became a starter in 2018, Kansas City is 75-24. 75-24. They are winning 3 of every 4 games with this guy at quarterback. This guy does not beat his own team. Just doesn't do it. Here's Mahomes' numbers so far in the postseason. I talked about this last week as far as his ability to not turn the ball over. And I think that's one of the 2 keys to this Super Bowl too. But Mahomes in the postseason, 70 for 103. That's a 70% completion percentage. 718 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Now, 718 yards in 3 games, that's not, it's nothing electric about that. But still, it just goes to show you that he doesn't turn the ball over. And if he doesn't, you got to play a really good game to beat the Chiefs because you're not getting any additional possessions. So Mahomes is just an absolute force of nature, and I don't see him being any different this weekend. It's curious to me, actually, that San Francisco's a 1.5-point dog. If you think about it, how would you equate or how would you enumerate the advantage that Kansas City has at quarterback? Mahomes over Brock Purdy. That's got to be at least a touchdown, ladies and gentlemen. So really, is San Francisco 8.5 points better than Kansas City? I don't know. But they have San Francisco, a formidable team. I don't deny that for a second. I mentioned about the rooting factor. Look, it's still the Super Bowl. Let's face it. Tens of millions of people are going to watch it. They're going to watch for the halftime show, whatever their motivation is. It's still America's biggest spectating event. But and the Chiefs have brought apparently a whole new market segment of fans to the viewing audience and these Swifties and the like. But so what? I'm not a member of this tinfoil hat brigade that thinks there's something sinister with Taylor Swift becoming a Chiefs fan. It's fine. It's fine for the NFL. It's just what the NFL needs: more publicity, more money to carry on with. But it's also, by the way, this is a rematch of Super Bowl 54 in 2020. Kansas City won it 31-20. Now the Chiefs are trying to repeat. And it's not something that's happened very frequently, ladies and gentlemen, at least not recently. The Chiefs will be the first team in 19 years to repeat as Super Bowl champs. It was done before. 8 teams have done it. But it hasn't happened very recently. The last team to do it was New England 19 years ago, Super Bowls 38 and 39. It was done 7 times prior to that: Denver, Dallas, San Francisco, Pittsburgh twice, Miami. Green Bay was back-to-back in Super Bowls 1 and 2. Common opponents of 2 teams this year. San Francisco was 2-2 against Minnesota, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, and Philadelphia. Kansas City 3-1 against those same teams. Their only loss, they can remember that Monday nighter, the Eagles went out to Kansas City and beat them. The other thing I thought was of interest, because I mentioned the point spread before, that San Francisco is a 1.5 or a 2-point favorite in the game. ESPN surveyed 64 voters. That just goes to show you how profitable, I guess, ESPN is. 64 people involved in some ancillary way in their football operation, including our own Tim McManus. I saw his name there. And asked him 2 questions. Who would win the game, and who would the Super Bowl MVP be? And as far as winning the game, 49 of the 64 picked the Chiefs, which I'm not surprised. I'm a little surprised it's that many, right? It's like 80-some%. But I'm not at all surprised that the majority took Kansas City. That's a lot of the majority took them. And, of course, the overwhelming favorite for MVP, Mahomes, 38 of 64 picked Mahomes. Only 3 of the 64 picked Brock Purdy. I bet you can get a good number. I'll have to ask Sean Green that. You could probably get a good number on Brock Purdy as a Super Bowl MVP. But 49 of the 64 football people at ESPN liked the Chiefs. Now, what does that tell you? Maybe nothing. But it's sure the way I think about it. That's the way I think about this game, is that the Chiefs are clearly the more savvy of the teams coming into this game. As I mentioned, 4 out of the last 5 for them. They've got an all-world quarterback. And San Francisco, very, very good team, but still they've got a second-year man at quarterback versus really one of the best ever. That's going to be tough, I think, for San Francisco. But the odds makers say that they've got a more than 50% chance to win this game. So, and the only thing I'll mention too, before we get the break here, Xander, the keys to the game, as I see it, ladies and gentlemen, Kansas City has to run the ball. Kansas City was only 19th in the NFL running the ball this year. But San Francisco gave up in their 2 postseason games. The Lions and the Packers ran 57 times for 318 yards, at 5.6 yards per carry. The Chiefs have to successfully run the ball. The other thing, if Purdy turns it over, and you give Patty Mahomes a bonus possession or 2, you're going to lose. When we get back, the great Ed Werder is going to join me from ESPN. We're going to talk about this game. We're going to talk about coaching matchups, and we'll talk a little NFC East. That's all next on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford.
Celebrate your victories in style at Spring Mill Country Club. From Eagles wins to baby showers, weddings to birthdays, our picturesque venue is ready to host your special events. Make memories that last a lifetime in our stunning surroundings. Call Spring Mill today at 215-675-6000 and elevate your next event to unforgettable heights. Contact us now to book 215-675-6000.
John Kennedy Ford. Their reputation sounded too good to be true, so my partner and I decided to do a little digging.
They know we can see them, right?
We could get them a great deal if they just come inside.
They made us. Run! Uncovering a better car buying experience is easy at John Kennedy Ford. Enjoy your ride.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Welcome back to This Week in Pro Football. Pat Callahan here with you. Getting ready for Super Bowl 58. NFL honors also coming up, at which the 5 new members of the Hall of Fame will be chosen. A very tough class this year. Very good class, as I would say. Let's bring this gentleman on here, a long-time NFL commentator from ESPN, national correspondent, and a McCann Nunn Award winner, the NFL Hall of Fame. That would be Ed Werder. Ed, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
All right. Thank you very much for joining me. I know you probably have gotten about 1.2 million interview requests this week, and thanks for letting me win this lottery. Ed, let me start with this now. And I don't know if my syntax is right here or not, but talking about Reed and Mahomes, and I mentioned how under Reed, the Chiefs are 128-51. Under Mahomes, they're 75-24. I mean, they're almost indestructible together. Which one makes the other one better by more, if you know what I'm saying?
Well, first of all, I guess I thought that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick had solved the great question of, is it the great coach or the great quarterback?
Right.
Given that Belichick won 6 Super Bowls, but none without Brady, and Brady won 7 Super Bowls, 1 without Bill Belichick. But It's a fair question. And I guess if you look at it statistically in terms of playoffs by quarterback, Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes is 14-3 and averages 30.2 points per game. With Donovan McNabb and Jeff Garcia, Michael Vick, and Alex Smith, He's 11-13 in the playoffs and averages 22 points a game. So I think even Andy Reid, in a moment of real honesty, would defer to Patrick Mahomes and say, you have to have a great player. The great quarterback makes all the difference when it comes to this argument. And one other thing, anecdotally, that I would add was one of Reid's offensive assistants, Brad Childress, told me when Mahomes was there but not yet playing, he said, let me just tell you about this Patrick Mahomes guy. Like, he has a wow moment every day in practice. He's going to be incredible. And you know what this means? And I said, no, what? He said, it means Andy Reid's going to coach till he's 70 because he's never going to let anybody else coach this kid. So much for all the rumors that Andy Reid's going to retire after this game if he wins.
I mean, I guess if no other reason than to preserve his own legacy, and that if remember the old story, full well, when Barry Switzer took over for Jimmy Johnson, and lo and behold, wins a Super Bowl 2 years later. To some extent, that might have blemished Jimmy Johnson's legacy a little bit in Dallas.
But even in that situation, when I talked to Switzer, he knew I was a Jimmy Johnson guy. I mean, back then in the 90s, you were either on Jerry Jones's side or you were Jimmy Johnson, and I felt like Jimmy was, behaving like a traditional coach, and Jerry was stepping across the line. So I was viewed by the organization as a Jimmy guy, and probably still suffer the consequences of that alliance. But Switzer did say to me once, look, you don't have to give me credit for building the team that won the Super Bowl when I was a coach, but you got to give me credit for not screwing it up. At least I didn't screw it up. He said, somebody else they hired maybe would have screwed it up. I didn't screw it up. Fair enough.
But still, I want to give Reid some due. I was, as a long Philadelphian, and Andy's 13 years or so here was marked with a lot of optimism and then increasing frustration as the Eagles went down in conference championship games. But still, what an amazing staying power this guy has had. He is, in fact, now only the fourth head coach to go to 5 Super Bowls. What is it about him and his ability to reach his player that he's able seemingly to get the most out of them year after year?
Well, he did have great success with the Eagles. In fact, he's the only coach in the NFL who has 100 regular season wins with 2 different franchises. He's the winningest coach in the history of the Chiefs, and he's the winningest coach in the history of the Eagles. So quite an accomplishment. And to your point, the thing that surprises me about Andy, he's obviously very relatable, very engaging, very attached to his players, gives them all the credit that they deserve for, winning games. But I think he's been such a great innovator. Yeah. I think he was ahead of the curve on all of the RPO game and stuff like that. He hired college coaches for that specific purpose when he had Alex Smith in Kansas City and before, he unveiled Patrick Mahomes. So I think his ability to, as an offensive mind, a very creative guy. Obviously, we've seen some of the plays they've run that have been suggested by the players. He's just an incredibly creative person who's very open-minded and has somehow, despite being 60-plus years old, still engages very well with younger players.
Yeah, he certainly does. You can see it. Or you at least get the sense the Chiefs players really do like him. But I got to say, when you succeed, people tend to like you. I guess that's another thing, too. But all right, let me segue to the 49ers. And just let me ask you this. Because, hey, they're the NFC champions. They did what they were supposed to do. You beat who they put in front of you. But still, the 49ers trailed by both of the teams they played this postseason at halftime at home and very nearly lost and could easily have lost either one of those games to Green Bay and then Detroit. Is it fair to say the 49ers kind of backed in because their two, what were seen as their primary opponents, Philadelphia and Dallas, flamed out early in the postseason?
Well, yeah, I understand that point of view that the Cowboys and the Eagles, didn't meet our expectations in the postseason. And I guess the Eagles began that process with about 6 games left in the regular season. Right. But I guess I would answer that by saying, well, the 49ers proved their dominance against both those teams. They beat the Cowboys. They scored 40 against both the Cowboys and the Eagles. Right. They beat Dallas by 32 in San Francisco, and they beat the Eagles by 23 in Philly.
Right.
And Brock Purdy in those two games was completed 70.6% of his passes, 566 yards, 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. So I would say that it didn't matter. Like, I think they would have beaten Dallas and they would have beaten Philadelphia. I never saw Dallas go in there and winning that game.
Right.
Like the Eagles or the 49ers have knocked them out 2 of the last, 3 years. They've ended their season. And in the most recent game, the Cowboys never led. Then they beat them this year by 32, which is the worst loss McCarthy suffered in Dallas and the worst loss Dak Prescott has suffered in his 8-year NFL career. So I didn't see Dallas beating them. They needed somebody else to beat them. And, of course, as it turned out, they need to win at least once on their own. But no, I think the 49ers, to me, were always the best team in the NFC.
Right. But were you surprised at all by how the difficulty that they had in dispatching Green Bay and Detroit?
Sure. I've been surprised by the fact that their defense hasn't been as dominant as in recent years. And I think that's made them vulnerable. And to your point, you mentioned it, the run game. Right. Will Andy Reid commit to the running game and Isaiah Pacheco? Right. Because that is the way to beat this team. We saw the Lions do it for an entire half.
Agreed.
I think I saw a stat from Doug Clawson, who used to be with us at ESPN. Now he's a researcher for CBS. And his stat was that the 49ers entered this Super Bowl having allowed the most postseason rushing yards since any team to reach the Super Bowl since Green Bay in 1966.
Okay.
So, yeah,
right.
that's their vulnerability. And that, to me, is where the 49ers have been less impressive than I thought they would be. I mean, offensively, I think Brock Purdy's great. And I always have thought that. And I don't understand why people demean what he's done. He's done what Joe Montana and Steve Young did in a very similar type of system. He gets the balls to the playmakers in space, on time, and lets them do what they're supposed to do.
That is true, man. You're certainly right about that. But I think sometimes it's the amount of talent that San Francisco has on the offensive side of the ball. And in a public relations way, I think works against Purdy because the thought process becomes, well, just throw somebody back there. And with Debo and Ayuk and McCaffrey and Kittle, you're going to succeed. But
to a certain extent, Jimmy Garoppolo got that opportunity, and he didn't cash it in for a Super Bowl win. We'll see if Brock Purdy can do that.
Okay. Now, one other word about this game because I want to get back to the NFC East because it's always so interesting here, especially the people here in Philly. But one other word about this. Sal Pal comes on the show almost every week. And he's a big offensive coordinator versus defensive coordinator guy. He's always spotlighting that matchup with, say, the Eagles who are playing that week. Now, this week, I think, Ed, give me your take on this, because the way I see it, the Chiefs really don't have an offensive coordinator. Andy Reid is their offensive coordinator. And curiously, I think it's the same way on the 49ers side of the ball. I went through the record and fact book. I don't see anybody with the actual title offensive coordinator in San Francisco. But which defensive coordinator do you think can make more trouble for the offensive genius that's on the other side of the ball?
Well, I think the matchup that's most interesting in that regard is Kyle Shanahan, the offensive play caller and head coach of the 49ers, against Steve Spagnuolo, the veteran defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. If you look at it, the 49ers have played Kyle Shanahan 49ers have played the Chiefs 3 times. They've lost all 3 of the games, all by double digits, including an 11-point loss in the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy, as I said, coming off the most productive season for a 49ers quarterback ever, and they've had 2 Super Bowl winning Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Joe Montana and Steve Young. He has 3 elite players in terms of yards after the catch, which the 49ers lead the league in for the 6th consecutive year. Christian McCaffrey, the best running back, Deebo Samuel, the best wide receiver, George Kittle, the best tight end in that capacity. And so that, to me, is the big challenge for Spagnuolo, is how is he going to, be able to create pressure on Brock Purdy and force the ball out of his hands and maybe create a couple of turnovers and yet not put his defense at risk in the back end when the ball's completed and get these guys to the ground quickly. Yeah. I think Spagnuolo, the Chiefs are second in the NFL in scoring defense. This is the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has had. And He's needed it because it's the worst offense they've had. Yeah. They've averaged under 22 points a game, but by far the worst for Reid Mahomes offense in that era. And Spagnuolo likes to blitz, and Purdy's been great against the blitz. So that, to me, is where that'll be the interesting breakdown to me is what happens when Steve Spagnuolo blitzes one of, whether it's Trent McDuffie, which he uses a lot,
Right.
or Justin Reed, he uses a lot out of the secondary as pass rushers, or can Chris Jones, dominate the game up front?
Exactly right. San Francisco 4th in passing offense, Kansas City 4th in passing defense. You're certainly right about that. And that stat you just gave out, Ed, that's fascinating about yards after the catch. It's only fitting, really, because I think Bill Walsh invented the term yards after the catch because it was his offense that started it all.
Right. The long handoff, the short pass, really a long handoff. That's all.
Doesn't hurt to have Jerry Rice and John Taylor taking the long handoff.
Or
right.
Brett Jones.
Yes. All right, we're talking here with Ed Werder from ESPN. Ed, all right, I just got to drag you back now to this NFC East. I want to ask you this. Which team, obviously both, and you alluded to it a few minutes ago, both teams coming off really, really just disconsolate endings to their season. Dallas shockingly losing to Green Bay in terrible fashion, and Philadelphia, a 1-6 nosedive that they just never, Ed, came close to getting out of. Which team has the bigger hill to climb going into the 2024 season?
Really shocked me what happened to the Eagles because I covered a couple of their games, including the one where they were at Tampa Bay early in the year, and DeAndre Swift, dominated the game running the football, and they just never really seemed to take advantage of that. I guess both coaches were in some jeopardy when the season ended, which is remarkable given that the Eagles were the last undefeated team in the NFL and coming off a Super Bowl appearance, and the Cowboys were winning 12 games for the third consecutive season, and yet both coaches were fortunate to survive this offseason. I think it's easier for the Eagles to win back the faith of their fans because they've had some postseason success, because they've been to a Super Bowl recently. And for the Cowboys, it's been almost 3 decades since they've, gotten to a championship game even. Right. So, and to have their hopes built up the way they were with these 3 consecutive 12-win seasons and then lose, 2 of the 3 years at home in the first round in games they never led is just really awful. And it's going to take a lot for the people who are fans of this team in the Dallas area to ever believe in them anytime soon.
I think you're right about that. Were you surprised that Jerry did not pull the trigger on Mike McCarthy?
I think the only reason that Jerry Jones at age 81 did not fire Mike McCarthy, and let's be honest, he had the chance to get a 6-time Super Bowl winning coach in Bill Belichick, or Mike Vrabel. And what are his teams known for? Being physically, mentally tough and overachieving. Everything the Cowboys aren't right now. I think the thing that saved Mike McCarthy was the fact that he took over the play calling this year, and they had great success with Dak Prescott. They led the NFL in scoring. Prescott had arguably his best season, and he loves that relationship. And I think Jerry did not want to force Dak Prescott to endure a 3rd consecutive offseason of changing the offensive system. Right. And that probably saved McCarthy. That and the fact he had 1 year left on his contract, and Jerry doesn't like to pay guys who aren't doing their job.
That's interesting. Your take about Dak, and you're probably right. You're probably exactly right about that. And if there's any NFL player who's going to be under the gun going into the late part of the 2024 season, it's going to be Dak Prescott. I like the guy. I like him. I think he's a very, very good quarterback. But, boy, he is going to be under the microscope coming into next January, assuming Dallas has a similar type season and gets there, Ed. But
because he's gonna be making even more money. He's got leverage. Despite what happened to this franchise, he's got incredible leverage against them, and he's going to get paid again. I mean, the last time he got paid, he had the worst possible thing happen to him. He got franchise tagged, and he broke his leg and only played 5 games, and he still won the negotiation and got a no trade provision, no franchise tag, no transition tag. So Jerry's going to pay him an astronomical sum to extend him again this offseason, or he's going to create a pathway for Dak Prescott to get to free agency after 1 more year in Dallas that they can't stop. And I can't see that being the solution. So, you're right. A lot of pressure will be on Dak Prescott, and he'll be more criticized than ever if he doesn't deliver.
All right. Ed Werder, I really appreciate you taking this time, Ed. Listen, where can people find you? What kind of, is there anything that you'd like people to tune into as you go into the off season here, podcasts, anything like that? Where do people find Ed Werder?
Well, on social media, I'm on Twitter at ESPN Ed Werder. You can find me on there. Plenty of people do, and plenty of people write me not so nice notes about it.
I see it. I see it.
But that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. And then I will cover, the team to a certain extent in NFL, as news merits in the off season, and there will be no shortage of that as is ever. There's a season in the NFL with games and a season without games, and they require an equal amount of attention. Yeah. And other than that, I do the Doomsday podcast with a friend of mine named Matt Mosley. We cover, do one after every game the Cowboys play, because I cover almost every Cowboys game for ESPN. We cover the Cowboys like no other team, and that's been the case for a long time, and probably the only reason, let's be honest, I still have a job at age 63. But here we are, Pat. Here we are, still talking about these teams.
I know, Ed, and you do it well. God bless you. I hope you do it for a number of years to come. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, and look forward to following you throughout the offseason. All right.
Sounds great. Let's do it again.
All right. The great Ed Werder. Thank you very much, Ed, for coming on. I got to talk to this guy. I got all kinds of questions for the great Sean Green, who I see is ensconced. He has the top table at Media Row in Vegas. We'll do that next on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford.
Discover the essence of true community banking with First Bank, your trusted partner across Eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Their network of branches brings you convenient access to dedicated personal bankers who understand your unique needs. At First Bank, you're not just a customer, you're a valued member of the community. But that's not all. They are excited to join forces with another pillar of the community banking world in Eastern Pennsylvania, Malvern Bank. Their team of professionals will fit seamlessly into First Bank's culture of dedication and understanding your financial aspirations to fuel your success. With a deep-rooted commitment to Eastern Pennsylvania, Malvern Bank stands as a testament to community values and unwavering support. Experience the difference of real relationships and dedicated personal bankers. Connect with any member of the team today at our Westchester office, conveniently located at 849 Paoli Pike, or you can call them directly at 484-881-3800. First Bank is an equal opportunity lender and member FDIC. At Whistler Pearlstein LLP, we assemble the most effective team to handle all of your legal needs. There are players and pretenders, but our hustle and heart set us apart. In practice now for over 75 years, we're proud to be one of the most prominent full-service law firms in the Philadelphia region. We offer 17 different areas of practice, including business, corporate, and tax education law, real estate, zoning, and land development, municipal law, and litigation. Our top-rated attorneys and staff are laser-focused on client success. We strive to provide outstanding legal counsel with the highest level of care and consideration. Let us show you the Whistler way. Learn more at WhistlerPearlstein.com or email Michael J. O'Donohue at mod@WhisPearl.com. WhistlerPearlstein.com or mod@WhisPearl.com.
I want to be a game changer in construction. I want to be able to provide diversity in the workforce, and it starts at the top. I started Rodriguez Construction Group in 2013 with 2 employees, and we're 85 strong today. M&T has been a great partner since day one, providing us the access, the opportunity, the funding to be able to continue our growth. We can change the community in a positive way, one person at a time, one job at a time, and one family at a time. I think M&T Bank is very committed to the community, just like us.
Back this week in pro football. Pat Callahan joining you. Thanks again to Ed Werder. An all-star lineup. No bigger all-star than this guy. Let's get him on right now. And that'd be the host of the Sports Gambling Podcast, the great Sean Green. Sean, how you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, coming to you from Media Row here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, probably in the top spot too. Probably
no, not even close. We're we're a pirate punch here, commandeering tables when they open up. So, yeah, the big dogs are out, but us scrappy underdogs are finding our way out here at Media Row.
Is that Media Row as I picture it, Sean? I've never been, I've never actually gone to that. But it just seems to me like, are the producers the ones who have a living hell that week? Because they're the ones who have to buttonhole people to walk around and drag them over to their table to get interviewed.
Yeah, you feel bad for some of these, because they get led around and then everyone's running a couple minutes behind, and it's just this giant conference center with a lot of just people posted up with laptops and mics like myself.
Exactly. But all right, we got one of the best ones right here. So let's get to it.
Let's go.
A few things I wanted to one-offs I wanted to hit you with here, Sean. Was it? I see somebody put $1 million on San Francisco money line. Is that same guy from Houston? That guy with the mattress business, or is this? I
don't know. So it's weird. I've seen Caesars put out that they took. The biggest bets, they've taken $1 million. I think $2 million bets on the 49ers. And then I just saw Billy Walters, who was walking around here, Media Row. He said he's going to be betting on the Chiefs somewhere between $500K and $1 million. So it seems like there's, I guess I would say the sharps are kind of leaning San Francisco, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because the limits really open up as they get closer to kickoff here. So I would say it feels like the sharps are on San Francisco.
Well, that's funny. Okay, let me segue into that then, Sean, because I mentioned earlier in the show that ESPN surveyed its 64 football-related, I guess, on-air people. 49 of those picked the Chiefs, which is a substantial majority. So I was going to ask you what is the public doing? Well, what is your sense of what the public's doing as far as coming down on this game? Because 49 are still a 1.5 to 2 point favorite, right?
Yeah, that's always scary when it does feel like it's somewhat lopsided for the public and the line isn't moving. It does feel like your average, I would say probably 2 out of 3, maybe even 4 out of 5 people that we've talked to are saying Chiefs. Because really, the case for San Francisco, why the sharps like San Francisco is those advanced metrics, those yard per play, the power ratings that they have going for the whole season certainly favor San Francisco, and that's why they were favored coming into here. But if you have a pair of eyes and you've watched playoff football, the Chiefs have looked much better. And then you throw in the recreational fan of saying, oh, hey, Patrick Mahomes is an underdog against Brock Purdy. I'll take Patrick Mahomes. So I think it's, more star power on the Chiefs is certainly helped drive in their action. But it does feel like the public in general leaning Chiefs here.
All right. Are there any let me hit you with a couple of props that I saw, Sean, and you tell me how you would get down on them. Brock Purdy over 1/2 an interception. I mentioned it earlier in the show. This to me is a key for Kansas City to win the game. If you give Patty Mahomes one extra possession, chances are you're going to lose just on that alone. But tell me where you think that number is. How do you think that number is?
Yeah, I love it. Purdy in the playoffs has been not very accurate, which has really kind of hurt them and put them in holes. Green Bay dropped a number of interceptable passes. Now, the Chiefs don't, at least in the regular season, didn't force a lot of interceptions. But in the playoffs, they have been. And you just look at this defense, this Spags-led defense. They dominated the Dolphins at home, very good offense. Now, granted, it was cold weather in Kansas City, fine. But then they went into Buffalo and into Baltimore and really did a great job on 2 of the top-tier offenses in the league. I mean, Lamar Jackson's MVP. I know people are frustrated with his performance, but I think you have to give, and they got some, a nice fumble right there on the goal line, that kind of stuff. But I think you've got to give this Chiefs defense a ton of credit. And that, to me, is the biggest part of the handicap. Everyone wants to talk Mahomes, and certainly he deserves his flowers. But I think really the matchup to watch is this Chiefs defense against the 49ers offense.
That's right. Chiefs defense, right, against the 49ers. That is going to be, even Ed Werder was saying that Steve Spagnuolo against Kyle Shanahan. And I think the Chiefs, you're right. The Chiefs have got to win that. If the Chiefs win that battle, they're going to win this game comfortably.
Yeah. Yeah, I would be shocked if Chiefs win the turnover battle and don't win the game.
Fair.
And especially the interception stuff. And I even think some of the alt interception stuff for Purdy is in play. Again, the guy's inexperienced. Like, he's never played in the Super Bowl before. And we saw how even Lamar Jackson seemed to get into his head and was doing some stuff, forcing some balls, because you have Patrick Mahomes on the other side. You think you got to make that big play to kind of counter Mahomes, and it gets in these guys' heads.
I think you're right. And I tell you, getting into somebody's head, whose head has more ready access to it, Brock Purdy or Patrick Mahomes? And yet you're saying, the sharps obviously aren't seeing it that way. It's very interesting. One other prop I thought I wanted to get you to comment on because I liked it, and that is Travis Kelce to score a touchdown. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you can get that. I think some places had it as high as even money, even at -110. I think he gets involved. I think that's, he adding on to that, Kelce to have the most receiving yards in the game, you can get that at like 3-1. I don't mind that. I think he's going to have a decent matchup for them. And clearly Mahomes is just kind of locked in on him in the playoffs. He clearly was playing possum a little bit, or at least was saving it here for the playoffs.
That's right.
I mean, he had 11 catches on 11 targets.
Yeah, he tore Baltimore up. You're right.
Brandon Ayuk is the favorite for most receiving yards in the game, and I don't really like that because they're going to put L'Jarius Sneed on him. I think they're going to have him shadow Brandon Ayuk, and Sneed has been playing really good defense.
Yeah.
I think they're going to struggle throwing the ball, especially at Ayuk. So I think Kelce most receiving yards on top of the touchdown is a fun angle.
All right, Sean Green, give me this Super Bowl pick. I want you to give me both your pick and the over-under.
Yes.
Which way you are leaning.
No leans here. I'm not a tower in Italy. I only give out picks here, Pat. No leans. I am going Kansas City 28, San Francisco 49ers 17. You get the under, and you get the Chiefs there outright. And I think Kelce MVP is kind of fun if you're looking for a long shot MVP. Probably going to be Mahomes, but at 13-1, Kelce's kind of fun.
How about Kyle Juszczyk MVP? I see somebody bet 140 on him at 75,000 to 1 odds.
Yeah.
So 5,000.
I think Juszczyk is fun for some of to have a catch, to have the first catch for the 49ers. Kramer gave that out at 25-1. That's kind of fun. But MVP, I mean, you would have the formula for him to win MVP is just so insane. I would almost rather bet the kickers, one of the kickers at that price.
That's really interesting. You're right. It would just take it would take a celestial series of events.
I mean, McCaffrey would have to get injured, and then they would somehow use Juszczyk as their main running back, which they wouldn't do. So even if he has 2 touchdowns, I think it's really tough. If you like him,
that's by John Riggins, and that's by the spirit of John Riggins to make it. But you're right about that. But are there any other props that you found very fascinating relative to this game?
I mean, like I said, I like the Kelce stuff there. I do think Justin Watson is another guy to watch on the Chiefs. I like his over receiving yards, 16.5. I think that's a decent matchup. And then if you want long shot on top of that, Justin Watson to be the first player to get 20 receiving yards, that's 35-1. I think that's a fun, call it a pizza bet, whatever you're paying for a slice of pizza, put on that because, he averages 18.5 yards per catch for the Chiefs in his 2 years there. So maybe he's the first guy, maybe, his first catch could be 20 yards. Right. So him to be the first guy to get to 20 receiving yards at 35-1, I think is a fun play.
Pretty good. Yeah. All right. Well, I got it down here, Sean Green, 28-17.
28-17. Lock it up.
Now, I don't want you to get all emotional on me. This is our last show of the year here, and I know you have a tendency to sound like Dick Vermeil, but I did enjoy having you on all seasons. Great. 2 years now you've been with me, and I appreciate it very much. And I look forward to many, many more years of the posse and the all the boys joining me here.
It's been a great run. Appreciate you having me on, and it's honestly really cool to be on the show, not only with you, but then a bunch of other big dogs in the space. So a lot of fun, and glad I got to do all these shows with you, Pat.
All right. Sean Green, thanks a lot. Please stay well and continue to follow the Rams right through the offseason. Now, I am determined to make you a Ram fan by the time our partnership is over.
They did really well in the draft last year. Look out. If Stafford can stay healthy.
Look out his way. Sean Green, thanks very much, pal.
Take it easy.
All right, great Sean Green. Gary Meyer's going to join me next. Gary's already teed up here. And we want to talk to Gary about this game. Gary, long-time veteran of Super Bowls. We'll talk to him about this game. We'll talk to him, try and sneak in a little Hall of Fame with him, too, when we get back here on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford.
I got everything you need.
Anything can happen when you go live.
I got everything you need. No trouble, don't need a thing. Snap your fingers and I'm on the scene. Yeah, don't need a thing. Snap your fingers and I'm on the scene.
Live Casino and Hotel Philadelphia, voted best casino in Pennsylvania.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
John Kennedy Ford. Their reputation sounded too good to be true, so my partner and I decided to do a little digging.
They know we can see them, right?
We could get them a great deal if they just come inside.
They made us. Run! Uncovering a better car buying experience is easy at John Kennedy Ford. Enjoy your ride.
Johnny Apple's restaurant and bar opened in 2001 and for over 20 years has been serving great food and good times to Bucks County residents, friends, and family. Ideally located at 184 Buck Road in Holland, Johnny Apple's offers a terrific array of steaks, seafood, and daily specials. They also host private parties and affairs of any size. For excellent food, great company, and a relaxed lunch or dinner, check out Johnny Apple's restaurant at 215-953-9900 or at johnnyapplesrestaurant.com.
Welcome back. This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford. Pat Callahan joining you here. Don't forget, give me a follow on X at TWIPF. Pat, you follow this guy, please. That would be at Gary Myers from the New York Daily News, from the Dallas Morning News, and, of course, the author of Once a Giant, which was an excellent book. I recommend it to anybody. Gary, how are you?
I'm doing great, Pat. How are you? I can't believe the season's almost over.
I know, Gary. I know. We're done with another one. So just shine up the clubs, Gary. Shine up the clubs. I know you're still making the rounds on that book. So I assume the book's still going well?
Yeah. I mean, I've basically dedicated this whole season to promoting the book and, different media venues and platforms. And it's been very gratifying how well it's been received and how well it's selling. So,
good.
And thanks to you for pumping it up during the course of the season as well.
Good for you. Happy to do it. All right, Gary, I got a few things I want to hit you up with. Let's start first. The Hall of Fame Final Five will be announced shortly. I know you cannot disclose that. You are sworn to an oath of omerta relative to that. But just to describe for me, was this class tougher than most to winnow it down to that number?
Yeah, I mean, we had our final 15, I mean, all great players. And, we have a log jam at wide receiver and a bunch of really good pass rushers that we had to, talk our way through and figure out, how we get from 15 to 10, from 10 to 5. And I think when they announced the class tonight, I think it's about 10 o'clock Eastern time on the NFL Honors Show. They're going to come, present to everybody. I think you're going to be really happy with it. It's really a strong class, and there'll be maybe a couple of surprises in there for you about the makeup of the class. But overall, I think we did a really good job here.
Good. Good. I mean, it is a strong class, and it was tough to win her down. Now that you mention it, I guess that logjam at wide receiver, that could happen almost indefinitely now, Gary, because it's one of the glamour positions in the NFL. The way the game is played now, there's always an excess of quality wide receivers with a lot of heavy stats to back it up. That could be a problem for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, we went into the process this year with Andre Johnson and Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne. It reminded me of a few years ago when we had Chris Carter and Tim Brown and Andre Reed. And I mean, they were just knocking each other off for years and years. And finally, Chris Carter, who was whining a lot about it publicly, if you remember, he went on Inside the NFL and was crying about, what happens after he passes away and, how does his son feel? I mean, he was really tugging at the heartstrings there. And he was the first of those three to get in. And then it got in one year after the other, all three got in. So I would imagine that all these guys, well, I can't say that. I'm not sure all three of them are Hall of Fame worthy. And there's going to be some other receivers coming up.
I know they're going to bounce them out, Gary. You're right. That's very well could happen.
Yeah, so, I think there's a couple of receivers coming up in the next few years. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but
it's tough at wide receiver. No question.
Because Pat, the numbers are getting so astronomical because of wide open passing games that
I know.
To compare different eras, it's really not fair to the guys who didn't play, in the last 10 years.
Exactly. Let's talk some head coaches, Gary. I had asked you, see if I get your take on this. 7 head coach jobs were open this year. That's the usual number, seemingly, in the NFL.
Well, actually 8 if you count New England,
yeah.
or the Raiders.
Right. That's true. It was 8 because I didn't have New England down here. Gerald Mayo ended up with that job. You're right. It was 8. Just tell me, if you could, who you think did the best hire? Who got the cream of that crop and why?
Oh, it's not even close. I mean, who do you think I'm going to say?
I think
it's not even close.
Yeah, you're going to say Jim Harbaugh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy got to 3 NFC championship games in 4 years with the Niners, 1 Super Bowl. He's coming off a national championship at Michigan, and you know how I feel about Michigan because my kid went there. I think he's tremendous. We already know, like if he hadn't already coached in the NFL, you might say, well, how is his shtick going to translate to NFL players? Because Jim's a little quirky, but we already know he can win in the NFL. He's already done it.
Right.
And he came really close to winning a Super Bowl against his brother. So he's got the key ingredient there. He's got the quarterback. And now it's just a question of them drafting well. I mean, they have major cap problems, but they also have guys that, they can get rid of and solve it in Bosa and Khalil Mack and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, between the 3 of them. I mean, it probably makes up half the cap right there. So there'll be some, restructuring of contracts or maybe just outright cutting guys or trying to trade them. But they'll get under it. And they have a really good cap guy there. His name is Ed McGuire. He's been there for a long time. Again, having Justin Herbert there gives Harbaugh a running start.
It does.
You don't have to go look for the quarterback, which we know is the most important position in sports.
Right.
And, compare that to what Gerard Mayo is taking over in New England. They'll draft a quarterback, but, the odds, quarterback's going to likely go 1, 2, 3, Pat. And history has shown when they go 1, 2, one guy is a star and the other guy is a bust.
Yeah.
And now when there's 1, 2, 3, you figure one of the guys will be okay.
Yeah.
But someone's going to go belly up on this thing.
Yeah.
And, it remains to be seen. I think, because I'm completely prejudiced with Michigan, I think J.J. McCarthy is going to be a great player. Harbaugh just never let him throw the ball because he played an NFL offense there, and they ran.
Sounds vaguely familiar with previous Michigan quarterbacks, Gary. But you're right.
There's a track record of a recent Michigan quarterback won a bunch of Super Bowls. So I'm not saying McCarthy's going to do that, but I think he's got a chance to be a real good player.
What are your thoughts on Dan Quinn as far as he didn't exactly buttress his or burnish his resume with his last game before the Commanders, who were the last team to make such a hire, brought him on. Do you think that's a good fit there? Do you think there's any chance Dan Quinn could be the guy to lead the Commanders out of the NFL wilderness?
Well, Pat, think of it this way. When the regular season ended and Dallas was the 2 seed and their defense led the league in turnovers again, and we're talking about Dan Quinn's going to have his choice of 5 jobs. They go out and, lay the largest of eggs the next week, give up 48 points to the Packers, and now, what an uninspired hire. Now, listen, his defense played like crap against the Packers, but should that wipe out all the good stuff? I don't know. But here's where I think it was somewhat of an uninspired hire for Washington. They just fired a coach who took a team to the Super Bowl in his previous job and lost. And now they just hired a coach who took his previous team to the Super Bowl and lost, and not only lost, but he blew a 28-3 lead when Quinn was in Atlanta. So it almost seems that they hired the same guy, but with different personalities, but same resume, I mean. And I don't know. I think everything I know about Dan Quinn, and I know him a little bit, tremendous leader. His players love him. You've seen what guys like Micah Parsons has said about him since he left. Not Tony Pollard, because apparently Tony Pollard yesterday, when he was on one of those shows at Radio Row, was not even aware that Dan Quinn was not the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys anymore.
Tony very invested in the Cowboys' future there, not even knowing that.
Yeah.
But I always thought, Gary, I know I'm going to sound like hindsight being 2020, but I always thought all season long Dallas's defense was too small. That guys like Micah Parsons, Gary, my theory is that, in September, he is a house of fire. He's a holy terror. By January, he's exhausted because he's going up 40 plays a game against some guy who outweighs him by 75 pounds. And I think it just wears them down. And I think by January, that defense was exposed because they didn't have enough. They have a ton of speed, but they didn't have enough size to stop the run. And Aaron Jones killed him in that game.
Yeah, that's why I kind of laugh when people were making the comparisons between Micah Parsons and Lawrence Taylor. Taylor was 6'3", 245, and went against guys like Joe Jacoby, who had over 50 pounds on him. But Lawrence was never worn out at the end of the season. He had more energy and stamina than any player I've ever seen. Yeah. So I think you're right. The Dallas defense is not a big defense. It's a fast defense. But when you have some time to scheme against it, and although the Packers
and you don't fall behind by 2 touchdowns, right? I mean, that's a defense built to protect the lead. But one other thing I want to ask you about coaching, Gary, and I'm not surprised, quite frankly, that Bill Belichick's not an NFL head coach. There was, matter of fact, there was a piece in Pro Football Talk today about it, and it does lay it out the case that today's NFL GMs, they are not going to hire Bill Belichick. Come on. They're not going to do it, or an owner even. But Mike Vrabel, wouldn't that have been a really good fit in Dallas, Mike Vrabel in Dallas? Because that's what the team, Ed Werder was saying, is missing, is somebody who can bring that grit to that team so that they can get through those January games.
I can probably list 5 guys right now that will be better coaching the Cowboys next year than Mike McCarthy. I don't get that one at all. He's got a team that Jerry probably had, full expectation that it was going to make a deep run into the playoffs, and with a shot at beating San Francisco, because we see San Francisco has been beatable in the playoffs. I don't know why he kept him, just to run it back and do the same thing again.
I don't know if it was the money. I don't know if it was the last year of the contract, and or do you think Jerry was maybe a little shy? He was a little reticent about maybe a Vrabel or a Belichick because he's the GM.
Well, see, I really think, and I was advocating for this, or at least projecting as early as late October, that this was Bill's last year in New England. The Cowboys would lose as usual in the first or second round, and Belichick is the best fit in Dallas. Jerry's in his early 80s now. He's got a win-now team. Belichick is a win-now coach. He wants to pass Shula. He wants to win a Super Bowl without Brady, because the whole narrative in New England has changed since they've been separate. and Brady won without Belichick, and Belichick struggled, and they're saying, well, now it just proves it was all Brady in New England, which is a bunch of crap because it's just not fair to Belichick. I thought it was a perfect match, Belichick and the Cowboys. And you saw some of the things that Jerry said about Belichick at the Senior Bowl, which was so odd that he would say that, other than he's just putting pressure on McCarthy now. Yeah. But to me, Pat, 2024 is a wasted year for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a wasted year for Belichick when they might have been able to win a Super Bowl together. Because the Cowboys are just going to just going to run it back and do the same thing over.
Repeat is what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Vrabel would have been a good to there. And, Vrabel could wind up being the coach of the Jets in 2020.
Yeah,
and I am surprised. I'm probably different from you. I'm surprised nobody hired Belichick. I mean, doesn't Arthur Blank want to win? Is he more worried about Rich McKay's feelings and Terry Fontenot's feelings than he is about winning?
Very interesting.
Yeah. I just want to say this one story. I don't think I've told you this before. So I sat next to Belichick at the Hall of Fame Centennial class meeting in Canton a couple of days after the Patriots had gotten eliminated and what turned out to be Brady's last game, and they lost to the Titans in the playoffs. So I went up sitting next to him for 8 hours. And during the course of the meeting, we take breaks and stuff. So he was asking me questions about the process. It was the first meeting he was in. And then I was just kind of quizzing him on some stuff. And I said, Bill, did you ever think maybe a couple of years ago when they hired Pat Shurmur and all those rumors about the discontent in New England, that might have been a good opportunity to come to the Giants? And he said to me that at this point in his life, he just didn't have the energy or the desire to go to a place where a front office had to be rebuilt, the scouting department had to be rebuilt, and that's what he felt would have needed to be done with the Giants. So, Pat, if he felt that way 4 years ago about the team that he loves, that he didn't have the energy to go rebuild the Giants, why do people think he wanted to go anywhere he went and get rid of the general manager, get rid of the personnel department, and rebuild? He didn't want to do it from the Giants, it would have been 6 years ago in 2018. So I think that was just an excuse that people had because they were scared about Bill coming in. They were being protective. There was self-preservation mode for all these executives at different teams that were just scared about Bill. Jerry's got no excuse.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, I'm down to 30 seconds here, Gary. Give me your take on Sunday. I like Kansas City. I just think there's too big a disparity between the two quarterbacks. Give me your take on this game.
Yeah, I'll echo that part, and I'll give you one other reason. Kansas City's playing its best football of the year. The playoffs, going into Buffalo and Baltimore, 2 games I didn't think they were going to win, really showed me a lot. San Francisco could have lost either one of these playoff games, should have lost to Detroit, and then you throw in Mahomes over Brock Purdy, and I got Kansas City, say 28-20, something like that, 31-20.
Very good. Very good. Gary, I appreciate all this time. I appreciate you joining me all season long, too. It's our last show, Gary, so you're free to go after this. And but I do appreciate it.
I don't get to see you until September?
That's it, pal. We're done. You're free to.
Can you at least text me every now and then?
I'll do that. I'll give you the latest updates from the Eagles headquarters. I know you want to keep your ground on.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. Thanks again, Gary. Appreciate it, and look forward to following you all season long. All right.
Take care, Pat. Thanks a lot.
All right, great. Gary Myers joining me there. There's no better way to end this show for the season than to bring this gentleman on. We'll do that as soon as we get back. Ray Didinger is going to join me. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl. We're going to talk quarterbacks too. And I'll try and squeeze Ray maybe for a little Hall of Fame talk too. That's all coming up next as we wrap it up here on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Ford.
Concrete Cutting Systems Incorporated, the concrete cutting specialists in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. These guys are celebrating their 28th anniversary as the industry leader in the field of concrete cutting and robotic demolition. Any type of concrete cutting or drilling, concrete demolition or interior excavating, call the specialists. Concrete Cutting Systems. They're the only full union concrete cutting company based in Philadelphia. Call the guys today at 215-533-0652. The website is concretecuttingsystems.net. Let's go Eagles.
Evolution Energy Partners has helped hundreds of businesses save millions of dollars on their energy spend. They offer electricity and gas procurement strategies, efficiency audits and engineering and financing solutions, as well as online utility bill management. To learn how your business can save, visit www.evolutionep.com or contact Chuck Herschella at 610-329-8288. Evolution Energy Partners, energy solutions to improve your bottom line.
Hi, welcome back here this week in Pro Football. Let's welcome in our last guest for the year. And what better man to do that, of course, than the author of Finished Business, Hall of Famer himself, and, of course, a long-time Evening Bolton Daily News writer and NBC Sports Philadelphia, Ray Didinger. Ray, how are you?
Fine, Pat. How are you doing?
All right. Thank you very much for joining me, Ray. And I don't want you to get emotional now. We're just going to, you and I are just going to gut our way through this, all right?
Okay.
But thanks for taking the time. Let me start this, Ray, if I might, because I've been talking up. It's not hard to talk up Patrick Mahomes, obviously. His stats are what they are. But you know what, Ray? I think the guy has a love for the game that is almost really unparalleled amongst NFL players today. I think he loves to play the game, and it's just going to continue to drive him. Do you think he would have succeeded in any era of NFL football?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No question. He could have played, he could have played for George Halas in the 30s. He could have played for Lombardi in the 60s. Yeah. He certainly could have played for Bill Walsh. He's got a skill set that's special and unique. And he could have played anywhere because he's got everything you could possibly want. I mean, he's got mobility, which you wouldn't consider him. You wouldn't compare him to Mike Vick, but he can certainly move around. But he's got a strong arm and he's tremendous accuracy. But the other thing that he's got is that undefinable quality of seeing the field and feeling the game. We've seen so many guys, quarterbacks, come into the league that have the requisite size, the arm, all the physical things, all the measurables. But when the ball's snapped, that you can just tell they can't see what's in front of them. Right. I think the game just moves too fast for them, which I totally understand. But then there are the other guys who are somehow almost transcendent in their ability to kind of see the field. And it's almost like a still life. It's almost like an oil portrait. It's almost like everybody's just kind of there. Yeah. And they can kind of see the holes and they know exactly what they want to do. And they just have the instinct to be able to just kind of almost will things to happen. Yeah. Those guys are very rare. But when you got one, you know it and you see it. And that's what you see with Patrick Mahomes. So, yeah, I think if you asked me to pick a quarterback today to start a team, it would be him. And I think you could probably almost make that statement going back in time. I think he's, Andy saw it way back when.
He did.
When Patrick and give Andy credit for that. He saw it. It was it seems kind of, people find it hard to believe now, but there's a very mixed jury on Patrick Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech. His record down there wasn't very good. And there were a lot of people that thought that, he's talented, but he doesn't seem particularly disciplined. A lot of it I thought was just Kingsbury's offense, which to me didn't make a whole lot of sense. But Andy kind of saw through all that and saw the skills that this kid had and just thought, boy, if I can take him and just put him in my offense and give him a year behind Alex Smith to learn a little bit. But once we turn him loose, we're going to win a lot of football games, and it all came true.
It certainly did. And all you need to know, of course, Arizona takes Josh Rosen. Kansas City has to settle for Patty Mahomes. But you're certainly right. The Chiefs, what he saw, what Reed saw in Mahomes has been exactly right. One other name, Ray, I think would probably have also, among today's quarterbacks, I think would have succeeded in prior eras is Josh Allen. I think he's got, he's got that Roman Gabriel, Terry Bradshaw type. He does. I think he could just stand in there, and he's got a bazooka for an arm. I think he would have succeeded even back in the 60s and 70s era of the NFL when the quarterbacks were treated much more violently than they are now.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, to try and find a comparison for him, he certainly has Elway-like qualities.
Yeah.
In terms of his size, his ability to run, and a very strong arm. He's Elway-like. But I thought you just mentioned one that people wouldn't ordinarily think about, but I think is a very good comparison, is Bradshaw.
Yeah.
It's funny when people talk about the great quarterbacks. Bradshaw almost never enters the discussion, and he should. I mean, he was 4-0 in Super Bowls, and quarterbacked the best team I ever saw, which was the Steelers of the 70s. And I think just because, I don't know if it's his TV persona or the Burt Reynolds movies or whatever it is, I kind of think that people don't think of Bradshaw in that class, but they should.
They certainly should.
That Bradshaw had that made him great were exactly what Josh Allen has, which is size,
right,
and ability to run. People don't realize this. I'm kind of aware of it because I wrote a ton about the Steelers back in the 70s. Bradshaw was the fastest guy on the Steelers team. When they ran 40-yard sprints at training camp, Bradshaw was the fastest guy on the team. So, I mean, people don't think of him that way because he didn't run a whole lot, but he could really run when he ran. And he had a cannon for an arm. I mean, he really did. If you ask me the strongest arms I've ever seen, I would put him in that discussion. I would put Elway right there. I would put Brett Favre right there.
Right.
Bradshaw right in that same conversation. People don't realize that when Bradshaw came out of high school and went to Louisiana Tech, at that point he held the American record for high school javelin throwing. He had the American high school javelin record when he came out of high school of Louisiana Tech. Now, I'm sure by now it's probably been broken, but that will just give you some idea of what his arm strength was, and also his ability that he was the fastest. He was the fastest 40-yard dash guy on his own team in Pittsburgh. He was a very, very rare skill set.
I wonder if at any time he thought about maybe using that javelin technique on Chuck Noll during their early years together in Pittsburgh, because Noll was tough on him. Let me hit you with two other names, Ray, and you tell me, because Elway certainly could transcend, I think, any generation of NFL era in terms of his ability to play. I thought if in terms of NFL great quarterbacks, could they play now? Roger Staubach, I think, would be able to adapt because he has an innate, as you mentioned about Patty Mahomes. Staubach, I always thought, had the ability to see when a pocket was breaking down 2 seconds before it did. And the other guy, Dan Marino, because Marino was just a force in the pocket. And the way the game is, especially refereed today, I think he would have just picked defenses to pieces.
Oh, he would have. He would have. I mean, there's no argument there. When Staubach retired, Staubach retired with the highest passer rating of any quarterback who had played up to that point. His numbers, if you look at his career numbers in terms of touchdown passes and things like that, they don't blow you away compared to quarterbacks of today. But in terms of quarterback efficiency rating, Staubach was number one when he retired all time. So, I mean, he's certainly in my group of greatest quarterbacks I've ever seen, both college and pro. I mean, there aren't too many people, maybe besides you and me, that can remember seeing Roger Staubach play at Navy. But he might have been the greatest college quarterback I ever saw. I mean, he took the Navy football team, with not Division I recruits, but he took the Navy football team and played for the national championship in the Cotton Bowl against Texas, and it was all about him. So great college player and probably an even greater pro player. And Marino, for the reasons that you said, in today's NFL, the way teams are throwing the ball and the way teams are playing defense now, a quarterback with his release and his incredible accuracy he would put up incredible numbers. Not that he didn't put up incredible numbers when he did play, but I think today's game, like all of these zone defenses and things, I mean, he would just cut them to pieces.
I agree wholeheartedly. Ray Didinger joining us. Ray, I want to talk to the Eagles right now and ask you this. To what extent, if at all, did the Eagles fix the problems that surfaced during their 1-6 slide with the coordinators that they recently hired to replace Sean Desai and Brian Johnson? Brian,
yeah, right. I like the hiring of Vic Fangio. I do. I know there's sort of a mixed bag of opinion. I mean, some people like it, some people don't. I've known Vic Fangio forever. I mean, I covered the USFL. I covered the Stars, and I remember when he was on that Jim Mora staff, which was a really good staff, and he was coaching the linebackers. And then when Jim went to New Orleans, he brought Vic with him, and then Vic has been in the NFL ever since, and coaching a lot of different places. But he has a certain philosophy, and it's very sound. And I've always seen him as a really good teacher, and a guy who this doesn't play well in Philadelphia, as you know, Pat. He's not a huge blitzer. He will blitz some, and he will blitz selectively, but I think he blitzes smartly. He coaches to his players. He coaches to his talent. And I think one of the best things that he does is he's very multiple. He's very adaptable. He changes things from week to week. This idea that he's always one of those old school coaches who's got one way of doing things, and not true. I find him very adaptable to his talent. I mean, he's very good at identifying what his guys do well and sort of building his scheme and building his defense around them. And I know he's really good and remains so in terms of disguising defenses, making you think you're looking at one thing, but you're actually looking at another.
Fair enough.
So I think, for that reason, I thought Fangio was a good hire. Now, the other part of it is it's up to, now this is the Howie Roseman part. Right. He's got to go get him better players.
Right.
I mean, Vic's a fine coach, but you got to get him some linebackers, and you got to get him a couple corners and a couple of safeties. But if you do that, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. But that's easier. It might be easier said than done, because you just described 75% of their defense. But I certainly think you're right. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, Kellen Moore comes in. Just give me your thoughts on that. I mean, obviously he's got the pedigree, Ray. But do you think he's going to be able to get after it? Let's face it was statistically a fine year for Jalen Hurts, but obviously the results were really tarnished over the last month and a half of the season. Do you see Moore being able to get that offense back on track?
I'm a little less sure about that one. Because one of the first things you got to do to you talk about getting Jalen Hurts back on track. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole story right there. Right. But the first part of getting him back on track are getting the mistakes out of his game. I mean, you look at his numbers this year, yardage pretty good, but too many turnovers and too many interceptions. And interceptions are what got Kellen Moore fired in Dallas. I mean, his last year coach at Dak Prescott threw 15 of them. And if you look at his last 2 years in Dallas with Dak Prescott, he threw 25. So if the idea is you're bringing an offensive coordinator who can get the interceptions out of your quarterback's game, I don't know if this is your guy. Now we'll see. He's put up some pretty good numbers, and we know that in terms of yards and points, I mean, they were in the upper end of it. But to me, what really killed this team this year offensively were the mistakes they made. Yeah. And you got to get Jalen Hurts back to playing smarter, making better decisions with the football, and not turning it over. And that's going to be the biggest responsibility. Look, he's certainly young enough, and we know from what we've seen that he's certainly good enough.
Right.
A lot of this is just, if this is going to fall on the coach and figuring out a system that's going to allow him to play the kind of football he played a year ago. Because you got the players, you got the receivers, you've got the skill position guys, you've still got a very good line. There's no reason why you shouldn't expect Jalen Hurts to come back and have a big year. But he and Kellen Moore have to find that sort of simpatico where they both kind of see the game the same way, and Kellen Moore knows what kind of game Jalen Hurts wants him to call.
Right. I really think the Eagles should run out of the I formation more, but that's just me. Ray, I just think it benefits any quarterback to be able to occasionally just hand the ball off and go and end up 2nd and 4 as opposed to the way the Eagles do it. Be curious to see what they do over in the offseason. And one last thing about that. Now, they brought in two relatively savvy and seasoned coordinators. Moore's been around, obviously, as you were describing. Fangio has been around for a while. Does that marginalize Nick Sirianni to any degree, in your opinion?
Shouldn't. It shouldn't. I mean, I think this is the way of the NFL today. Right. Is, you know, the NFL, the way it's structured today is your head coach, whether he's a young coach or even an older coach, he's more of a CEO kind of coach, which I think is a smart way to go, to be honest with you. I think the idea of where the head coach calls all the plays, or either be it offense or defense, you wind up with a head coach who's really just coaching one side of the ball. The head coach has to coach everybody. Right. And I think it's easier for him to do if he has an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator that he trusts, that they know what they're doing. You kind of let them handle that. And then you've got your head coach is able to sort of coach and manage the whole game. And I think it's easier for him to kind of keep track of the time. It's easier for him to keep track of, I was going to say minutia. There's no minutia in an NFL game, but the timeouts, the challenges, when to challenge, when not to challenge, all of those decisions that have to be made really on the fly during the game. I think it's easier if the head coach is relieved of the minute by minute decisions on offense and defense, and he can kind of take the bigger picture look. And I think that's fine. If those guys, if Nick, and I'm assuming by hiring these guys, he must feel pretty comfortable with the relationship. If they can all work together, I think that's actually kind of the way of the NFL today.
Interesting. All right, Ray, you were a long-time Hall of Fame voter. Tonight, NFL honors, the Final 5 will be announced. Do you think Eric Allen has a puncher's chance at this point?
I certainly hope so, because first of all, you know, I'm an Eric Allen fan, and I think no question, he deserves it. I think it's been kind of an injustice that he's been overlooked this long. Yeah. I mean, if you talk about the really great corners of that era of pro football, he's right there in terms of years played, durability, playing in multiple systems, and never did what a lot of good corners, great corners, do late in their career and move to safety. He remained a cornerback right to the end, and there aren't that many guys that do that. I mean, Darrell Green was able to do it. There are a couple guys who were able to do it. I mean, even Rod Woodson, who's one of the most athletic corners I ever saw, finished his career as a safety. Eric never did. I mean, he played out on that corner all the way through his career and was really good. He could cover, but he was certainly physical. He wasn't afraid to tackle and made a ton of big plays. So, I mean, to me, he checks every box. And I think he should have already been in the Hall of Fame, to be honest with you. Yeah. But in terms of his chances now as a first-time finalist, I think it'll be hard. Yeah. You know, generally it takes a couple of times in the finals for guys to get over the hump. Now, you know, the Walter Paytons, the Franco Harrises.
There's always the exception.
You don't even think about them. They're just wave them in. But the other guys over whom there has to be a little bit of discussion and thought will generally take a few years before they get the call. And I think that will happen for Eric. But this was the necessary first step. And now that it's there, look, I would love to see him get it. Frankly, I would be surprised. But I think now that he's gotten this far, it tells me that ultimately he will one day be in Canton.
All right. I look forward to that. I hope he certainly makes it. All right, Ray. Give me your take here. Super Bowl 58. I think it's a good game. I posited earlier in the show that there's not really a fervent rooting interest here. I wonder if people don't have Chiefs fatigue. And the 49ers are not a likable bunch, at least not in my opinion. As a longtime Rams fan, I can vouch for that. But how do you see this game playing out? My take has been, Ray, that there's too big a qualitative difference at quarterback, and that's not a slight to Brock Purdy. But I just think the Niners have to overcome that delta there. How do you see it?
I am leaning Chiefs as well, and partly for that same reason. I think that you always look at the teams that are playing playing their best football right now. And if you look back over the whole regular season, if you were just judging it on the regular season, you would probably favor the 49ers. And that's probably why the 49ers are favored, because regular season, yeah, they were better. But you look at the playoffs, to me, the 49ers have struggled. I mean, they squeezed by Green Bay. They could have lost to Detroit, but they won that. Whereas the Chiefs, once they got in the postseason, once they kind of got through that rough patch and they got into the postseason, I mean, now they're playing like the world champs. Now they're starting to look like that team that won the championship last year. And you just, you just look at Mahomes' record in big games. You look at this is the other thing that I just saw this stat this week. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's pretty compelling. And that is Patrick Mahomes playing in domes. Because of the division he plays in, he doesn't play in a lot of domes.
Right.
But you put him in pristine conditions where he doesn't have any wind, he doesn't have any wet, the ball's in perfect shape. He's almost unbeatable. I mean, he's 13-1 playing in domes in his career, and his touchdown to interception ratio is 33-3.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. And I agree with you. I agree with you about Purdy. I think it's easy to kind of just get hung up on where he got drafted and just say, oh, he doesn't match up. Look, Purdy is a good quarterback. He really is. But here's the thing. Steve Spagnuolo's defense is going to really pose problems for him because they're going to bring a lot of pressure. And if you do the splits on Purdy, his quarterback efficiency rating against the blitz and his quarterback rating when he has time, very different. Also, his quarterback efficiency rating against zones versus his quarterback efficiency rating against man coverage, also very different. I think he's got the perfect sense of the field and his accuracy that he's very good against zone defenses. Yeah. He just picks zone defenses apart. But he has a little more trouble when they blitz him, and he has more trouble going against man-to-man. And I know that's exactly what Steve Spagnuolo is going to throw at him on Sunday.
All right. Well, Ray, I see it too. I don't know. As long as Mahomes, and I was reading a piece in the New York Post this week in which he's talking about he'll play as long as he physically can, because as I said before, the kid just has an unquenchable thirst for the game itself. Boy, oh boy, as long as him and Reed are partners in Kansas City, I think that team's going to be at or somewhere near the AFC Championship every single year.
Yeah, I agree. What is it, 6 straight years playing it?
Yeah, that's kind of a pattern.
I mean, they're kind of there.
Yeah.
There's been a little talk this week that Andy, if he wins, might retire.
Yeah.
Look, he is the oldest coach and head coach in the league right now, 66. But unless there's some kind of a health thing that we don't know about, I don't think he's just going to walk away.
Yeah.
He's got a chance of breaking all the records, and he's got the best quarterback playing right now.
Yep.
I mean, he's set up to keep this run going for a while.
He is. Yep.
I mean, if he's in good enough health,
that
I don't see him walking away. I mean, he's got a chance to win this thing a few more times.
Yeah, he does. You're certainly right. And it's a shame for the Buffalo Bills that those guys are out there, because they seemingly, and Lamar Jackson, that's a whole other issue I'd love to talk with you about. A whole other episode would be the foibles of the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills when you got these two guys together.
Pat, sometimes you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
I look back on the 70s about that, when that Steeler team owned it, and I look at Bum Phillips' Oilers.
Exactly correct.
They were a really good team. That was a really good team, and they just could never get past the Steelers.
Yeah, perfect analogy. Well, Ray Didinger, the book's called Your Last Unfinished Business, still I bet is out there, and I'd recommend it to anybody to pick it up. A great compilation of all things Philadelphia sports and also some national stuff. And I appreciate you joining me a few times this season, and I'd love to have you back again next year. And thanks for being my last guy. And all right.
I feel honored. I feel honored that I was able to help you lower the curtain on this week of pro football.
Believe me, at our age, that's the only curtain lowering I want either one of us to do. Right? All right. So
I consider it an honor, and I look forward to doing it again next year.
All right, Ray. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Ray.
thank you, Pat.
All right. Ray Didinger joining me. That'll do it. That'll do it for this season, for this week in pro football. Thank you very much to Xander Krause for putting up with this lengthy show once a week. And thank you to you for watching it. I appreciate it bringing it to you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Pro football is still the game. It's the number one game in the country, and it will be for a long time. So I look forward to getting together with you again next year for another season. This week in pro football, thanks again. Don't forget, follow me all off season at TWIPF Pat. Follow the network at JAKIB Sports. And this is it for this week in pro football. We'll talk to you again real soon.